Good afternoon. It's an honor and pleasure to be here, participate in this conference. I will speak about Daugavpils Fortress and about its garden on the way to restoration. Daugavpils is the second largest city by population in Latvia. But where on earth is it, and why do we have fortress and even a garden here? So let's go back for 2 centuries. At the beginning of 19th century, the government of the Russian Empire decided to strengthen the western borders of the country. The modernization of the fortifications of Riga and Kiev was started, as well as the construction of new large fortresses in Dnipro and Bobruisk. The main task of the Daugavpils Fortress was to protect the road to the then capital of the empire, St. Petersburg. As it is known, Napoleon's great army crossed the Russian border near the city of Kovna, nowadays Kaunas, in the territory of modern Lithuania in June 1812. The general plan of the Dnipro fortress was approved by the Russian Emperor Alexander I in August 1810. The author of the master plan and the first fortress builder was engineer Colonel Georg or Yegor Haeckel. In the center of the citadel, main part of the fortress, depicted in the general plan, an undeveloped field is marked between the blocks of military buildings, which, according to the tradition of that time, was the parade ground or square of the garrison. First fortifications were built in 1810-1812, but after Russian-French War, the construction of the fortress was resumed in 1814, actually from the beginning, as hastily built buildings were destroyed completely by the troops of French Marshal MacDonald. Here we can see the central part of the general plan of the Daugavpils Fortress of 1819, the building orientation of which differs slightly from Haeckel's original ideas. However, an unbuilt area of the parade ground still remains in the center. In the central part of the general plan of Daugavpils Fortress in 1832, the construction works are recorded that were completed in 1831, as well as stabilized version of the inner construction of the citadel, which basically corresponds to the current situation, can be seen. In the center, there is still an undeveloped field with inscription in the Old Russian orthography before 1918 Parade Ground Place. The military hospital building actually on the north, but you can see it on the south to you, let's say, as well as offices, houses from west and east side have been built around the parade ground. The square is separated from all sides except the south, but to the north from you, by narrow rectangles, which could be barriers or fence or hedge of bushes. Military drills and other exercises were held on the parade ground, as well as displays of garrison troops on ceremonial occasions, holidays, and during visits of the emperor and his family members. On its turn, in the central part of the general plan of the fortress of 1841, the parade ground is marked with light grey tone, and clusters of bushes or tree crowns are drawn along the perimeter, except for the edge opposite the commandant house. Black and white photographs were taken for archive materials in Soviet times. Nowadays they are in our possession, and it is a great information source, taken into account that main corpus of historical documents of the fortress has been stored in the Russian State Military Historical Archive in Moscow, and all our researches of it are suspended today. In the archive fund of the engineering department of the War Ministry of the Russian Empire, which is stored in this archive, the plan of the parade ground of the Dnipro Fortress itself has been preserved. It was made in Dnipro in 1847 in the fortress engineering team of the Livland Engineering District. The upper part of the drawing there is a fragment of the commandant house with a central porch and a guard post next to it. The guard post is surrounded by crowns of bushes or trees. The parade ground has an almost exact square shape. From all sides, except the one facing the commandant house, the square is separated apparently by a wooden barrier on wooden quadrangular posts. Crowns of bushes or trees are drawn near the barrier. Another line separates them from the field. From the explanations below the drawing, it follows that the new wooden posts were installed by order of the commandant of the fortress, as well as the removable lath was installed on movable crosses, probably intended as a support or stand in the form of cross. In 1850s, 1860s, magnificent colorful atlas of the Russian fortresses was created. It depicts the project of the Daugavpils Fortress with some planned but not realized fortification elements. As well, there is a planned St. Petersburg-Warsaw railway line, which was constructed later together with additional fortifications. The parade ground in the central part of the citadel, depicted in it with light green, is also bordered around the perimeter by marks similar to bushes or tree crowns, dark green spots. Very valuable information about the development of the garden on the side of the fortress parade ground of that period is provided by the memories of Vasily von Rothkirch. Von Rothkirch was a military person of the Russian Imperial Army, became Lieutenant General in 1890. He was a publicist, writer, actually one of the first regional researchers and historians of modern Lithuanian and Latvian lands. He served in Daugavpils Fortress from 1842 to 1859, including 12 years as the adjutant to the fortress commandant Andrei Szymborski. In 1890, Vasily von Rothkirch published his literary work, Memoirs of Theobald, where the third part is completely dedicated to Lüneburg, nowadays Daugavpils. In it, shared his memories of Lüneburg Commandant Szymborski and his service in Chancellery, later calling this period of his life as the happiest one. In these memoirs, he tells us that opposite the window of the commandant house with the emperor's apartment, there is a large green parade ground planted with 2 rows of pyramidal poplars. Around this parade ground is a highway pedestrian alley, which is used by the inhabitants of the fortress for walking, since walking on the ramparts is prohibited, and there are no other places for walking in the fortress. On this parade ground, before Szymborski, troop reviews and even exercises were carried out, and therefore there was more dust and sand on it than greenery. Already in the first year of his arrival, Szymborski requested a special permission from the emperor, so the exercises were carried out only in the presence of the emperor, on the designated parade ground. In a very short period, the parade ground became green with a beautiful velvet lawn. It was often moved and rolled with a heavy roller. Not only man, but no dog dared to appear on the grass, which was carefully guarded by prisoners standing in the corners with sticks. The commander of the engineer arsenal arranged gazebos, benches, and barriers in the gardens. The artillery arsenal painted all these structures with gun carriage paint. It was dark green colors at that period. In the part of the general plan of the Daugavpils Fortress, which was created in 1852, the central undeveloped field of the citadel is also called Parade Ground, and it is separated from the street by narrow rectangles. A fragment of the master plan of 1865 shows the construction scheme of underground water supply pipes. The inner space of the parade ground is divided into 4 sectors of green color. The sectors are separated from each other by narrow bands, which are connected in the form of cross in the center of the square, where there is a blue circle. Presumably, this could be the plan for the first tracks and fountain basin. At the fountain, the water supply pipe comes from the side of the commandant house, where it crosses the commandant administration building itself, apparently through the underground gallery. All pipes of the water supply system went from the water lifting house building, which was built in 1865-1866. The existing building nowadays is the visitor center of the fortress. On its turn, water was pumped into the building with steam pumps and engines through the gallery under the protective rampart and protective ditch from the 3 wells with special filters installed on the right bank of the Daugava River. And in 1865, the drawing of the fountain for the Daugavpils Fortress was also approved. We can see here a cross-section of the fountain bath and the fountain itself. There are figures of dolphins in the bottom, the large bowl in the middle, and figures of children with musical instrument and 2 small bowls on the top. In addition, jets of water pour from the holes in the line masks from the large bow. The general plan of the fortress interior of 1872 shows the scheme of the already built water supply pipes. In the center of the fortress parade square, a small circle with inscription "Fountain" is drawn. A water supply pipe comes to it from the north to you, and an asphalt pipe is drawn diagonally from it with a dotted line. Paths, trees, and other objects on the parade ground are not shown. From all this, it can be concluded that the first fountain on the parade square of the fortress was installed in the late 1860s, early 1870s. On this picture, dated by turn of the 19th and 20th century, you can see the historical fountain, wooden gazebo, and sectors of lawn. There are some trees also that were planted only a few years ago. On that picture that was taken on the same date and with the same people, but from opposite side of the garden, we can see closely the wooden gazebo, wooden fence, some bushes and big trees in the background. Ivan Lvov, the last commandant of the fortress during the Russian Empire's period, summarized the history of the fortress in his historical report, which was published in 1915. In the chronology of the construction history and daily military life of the fortress, Lvov has also noted the visit of Russian emperors and their family members, other nobles, to the fortress, including the events that took place on the fortress parade ground. For example, he writes that on 31st March 1846, Emperor Nicholas I went to the fortress from the bridgehead and first of all viewed the training of the Sardinian Royal Infantry Regiment on the parade ground. Lvov also states that in 1912, with the permission of the Military Council, 12-pound cast iron cannons, which were previously in the service in the fortress, were installed in front of the cathedral and in the central park of the fortress. You can see now in the picture that a new fountain was erected instead of the old one, with bowl and figures of dolphins. Actually, it was a monument dedicated to the centenary of the victory over Napoleon. That is why there was Russian imperial eagle on the top. We do not have any historical drawing of this fountain, and we do not know exactly how and if it was operating actually. We believe that water flowed out of the mouths of the lion masks on three sides of the pedestal. In the general plan of the fortress of 1913, which records the location of the internal buildings, instead of the parade square, there is a rectangle filled with greenery and a mark with number 16 in its center. There are no other buildings or structures in the garden area. Unfortunately, the legend of this drawing with explanation is not preserved in the archive file. In 1924, a monument to the fallen soldiers of the 10th Eisputer Infantry Regiment of the Zemgala Division of Latvian Army was solemnly unveiled in the fortress garden. It is likely that during the Soviet times, right after the end of World War II, this monument was partly destroyed and was used as a pedestal for the busts of Stalin and Lenin. Both during the first independent period of Latvia and during the Soviet times, soldiers and the inhabitants of the fortress liked to take pictures in the fortress garden. And the fountain monument and gazebo was particularly attractive. And during the City Festival in 2008, a classical music concert took place in the wooden gazebo as a first attempt to revive this place. The renovated monument to the fallen soldiers of the Latvian Army was unveiled in November 2017. And summarizing the data obtained from historical drawings and photographs, we can distinguish 6 stages of the formation of the Daugavpils Fortress garden, from the parade ground till the chaotic development in 20th century, 21st century of the garden, installation, destruction, and restoration of monuments. In total, there are 244 trees in the garden, 223 actually after the strong wind this summer, representing 15 different species and taxons. The taxons that grow mostly in the garden are European or common linden, small-leaved linden, and Norway maple. In addition, horse chestnut, silver birch, common ash, Pennsylvania ash, common spruce, poplar, Canadian poplar, common oak, western tuya, big-leaf linden, rough elm, and small elm grow here. The linden trees growing along the perimeter of the garden are around 100-140 years old. Some chestnuts were planted before 1940. The other trees are younger. No specially protected trees were identified in the garden. 7 trees have been recognized as especially valuable for the landscape. 84% of trees are in good condition and have cultural and historical value, but 16% of trees are recommended to be removed due to their condition or to improve the landscape, also to restore linden alleys. Today, the Fortress Garden is a place for peaceful walks and relaxation in the shady alleys. Public cultural events are also sometimes held here during the summer, and patriotic activities are also held here in November. And the development of the documentation for restoration of the Fortress Garden started in March 2023. Several feasibility studies have been carried out: dendrological, architectural, artistic, and geotechnical. And it is planned to implement the restoration works in 4 rounds. First of them is improvement of the garden and construction of engineered networks, including electricity, video surveillance, sound system, water pipes. On this axonometry of the garden, we can see that how the paths have shifted in relation to the ideal symmetrical view. And as a part of the restoration, we will try to restore the original design. Here, example also of a new lighting pole with lanterns that would be designed like in historical way. And we have only one photograph of the 19th century lighting pole, which was installed next to the garden near the commandant house, as you can see on the historical picture. Also, restoration of the wooden gazebo with all decorative elements and metlach tiles on the floor is planned. Also, we are planning to build a new tea pavilion that will be as the shape of the historical gazebo, and the pavilion will combine the functions of the cafe and the public toilet, including for visitors with special needs. And it is planned that the pavilion will be open year-round to provide ready-made drinks and snacks, including in winter, since it is planned to install an ice skating rink in the central area of the garden, if it will be possible. And the last stage is the restoration of the monument fountain. The elements will be carefully dismantled, cleaned, repaired, and reassembled. We plan to renovate fountain functionality. However, the issue that requires further discussion due to technical, political, and other reasons is the restoration of the imperial eagle. Despite its relatively small size, the Fortress Garden is a unique urban planning element that reflects the history of the development of the fortress and technology. It combines architectural, landscape, natural, technological, and memorial values that must be kept in balance. I hope that at one of the subsequent conferences, I will be able to report to you on the work done on the restoration of the Daugavpils Fortress Garden. Thank you very much for your attention.